right, so it's about time to spray right now, but before we do, there's a number of things that we're going to want to check first before we do any kind of a liquid application. The number one thing is, if you look behind me, you'll see all these toys in the yard. You've got hoses, you've even got a couple of open windows here and there and doors that you definitely don't want to have open when you do an application. So when you're going around the outside of a home and you're wiping down spider webs and you're checking the termite monitors and looking for mouse exclusion, also be looking at the doors and the windows to see if anything is open, because you don't want to be spraying into somebody's home naturally, right? So the first thing you're going to do, and this is what you can do when you're wiping down spider webs, is taking these toys and moving them away. So we'll do that now. So pull this away from the house. Depending on the product that you use, depends on how far your bandwidth is as far as your application is. So if you're using something like Talstar Professional, 2 feet out, 2 feet up. If it's Taurus or Termador, 1 foot by 1 foot. So make sure that you read and check your labels and be familiar with those before you do any applications. Work with your trainers to make sure you're on the right path there. Hoses are there. This place looks pretty cleared. To the right here, I've got some chairs and some garbage cans. Spraying is one of the most important things you can do. It helps prevent occasional invaders like beetles, centipedes, crickets. Definitely will help control your ants. And so you want to make sure that when you're doing your application that you've got a good barrier around the home. When I talk to customers, I try to explain it like we're doing an application, creating a moat that prevents the pests from coming in. And so if there are things that are obstructing your ability to do a good 2 foot or 1 foot application, depending on the label, then that's just a weak spot that pests can utilize or at least take advantage of to get into the home. So again, we're going to move this away. Common decency would be to move these things back when you get done. You can do that as you're spraying. I'll show that now. But at least in this area, I feel pretty good that I'm ready to do an application. So I'll put this backpack on. We'll start to show you what that looks like. Now I just have water in this today, and that's why I feel like it's okay to spray where I am. So just keep in mind that I wouldn't normally spray like this. But I wanted to show you the spray pattern of the, even though they have water, even though there's water in here, I'm still going to put gloves on just as a demonstration. Okay, so I have my PPE on, my personal protective equipment, making sure that I stay safe so I don't have to, if there's a chance to come in contact with chemical, I have something on. One of the things that most of your labels will say is that in order to do an application, you need long sleeve shirts and pants. So that's one of the bare minimums. You always want to wear gloves. Eye protection is a good thing to have as well, especially because you don't want any of that to come back into your eyes. What I wanted to do with this backpack right now, I just have water in here for demonstration, just so you can see kind of the spray pattern that you have here. All right, so one of the things to keep in mind is that when you're applying with your backpack, you want to make sure that it's an even application, so that you don't have one side of your spray that's really aggressive and then another side that's really thin. And a lot of what I see sometimes is when somebody sprays is they'll spray something like this, right? And they'll just kind of hit it like this, and you've got the top right here is really thick. You've got a good application here, but down here is not very much, and then you have a lot out here. Instead, turn your nozzle so it's at 90 degrees with the application or with the foundation wall, and do a steady run like this. If I was a pest and I wanted to get inside of somebody's home, I'm going to look for the easiest path possible. When you look at this foundation wall and the cement's starting to crumble and fall apart, there are a lot of openings that aren't big enough for mice, but definitely big enough for centipedes and millipedes, and spiders as well. And so when I do an application here, I want to make sure that I'm hitting this really aggressively to make sure that I'm getting up inside of those cracks. Again, not to the point of runoff, but really aggressively hitting up underneath the siding. Nice and easy fluid motion. Make sure that it's on there nice and aggressive. Then we're going to take a step back here. I verify that this window is closed. Keep in mind that different surfaces will accept the product in a different way. So if it's really smooth, it's just going to run off. And so you have to be pretty quick here. Do not spray the windows. Some products will leave a residual behind, and customers will ask us to come back out and wipe them down. So again, angle your spray away from the window and then move pretty quick. You don't have to go too slow. hit one right across the top. So we got a little bit of runoff. So maybe the next window, what you would do is you go just a little bit faster and pretty close to the edge, just a little bit of runoff there. One of the things to keep in mind that when you are spraying, I wouldn't stand downwind of it, always upwind. You don't want this stuff to get on you very often. Keep that in mind as you're spraying up above your head. You're okay to do it, just don't. What my dad would say is keep your mouth open so it doesn't get in your eyes. The fact of the matter is just don't get it in on your face at all. So let's keep going here. We'll touch this area. Again, this is pretty porous. It's not going to have a lot of runoff. We'll do a good 1 foot by 1 foot. And keep going. Step back here and hit this window. This is pretty good. As far as that goes, I feel like that's a good application. We got product on there. There's no dripping. Just keep going. One of the things I want to show you is that you can adjust this nozzle here. And so you can do a really fine mist, or you can make it pretty coarse. And so if you want to go fast through your day and still do a good application, you can adjust the coarseness. Just make sure you're aware that it might run off a little bit more. So be careful about that. Try to find a kind of a happy medium there. When it comes to deck, and this property doesn't have a deck, but I'll describe it to you here, is if you open this up pretty far, it turns into a pin stream. And I'll just show you, keeping in mind this is just water, so I'm not spraying off label here. But you can get a pretty good pin stream, and if you pump that up pretty well, you can go pretty far under a deck and hit that back wall where those insects are hiding. Again, high moisture areas are where bugs like to be. Underneath decks, prime real estate for bugs. So hit those areas. Make sure you got something underneath there, or else you're going to be going out for service calls and customers aren't going to be satisfied. I want to come back to one thing here. If you noticed, I kind of hesitated. I really wanted to spray this beam because when I wiped down spider webs, I found some there. So I was really tempted to spray, but when you think about it, what am I about to do? I'm going to spray this surface. What's going to happen when it rains? It's going to come down, it's going to wash into this gutter, wash it out here on the ground. Probably not too big of a deal, but not very effective either. Why waste the time? So that's why you saw me hesitate. I stopped and said, well, it's probably not going to work very well. So let's keep going around the outside, creating that moat or that barrier. I treat it up underneath this part right here because that's a place where spiders will spend a lot of their time. A good question to ask yourself is, what do you do around an AC unit? Right? Because they're taking air from here, pushing into the home. I prefer you just skip things like that just to make sure that we're not potentially putting some of this fine particle or mist into their home. Hit the corners where the spiders spend their time. That window's closed on the inside. Let's talk about the floor mats. What happens when you put this back? So as far as something like this, we've got a door that's open. I'm just going to close this here. Make sure we don't have any product that goes inside. When you think about a floor mat, the natural thing for people to do is before they go in the home is wipe their feet. If you sprayed the surface of that floor mat, you're going to they're going to track chemical all into their home. And so ideally the best thing to do is to take it and move it away. Sometimes you can do it with your foot, sometimes you might have to do it with your hand. Doing an application like this is going to be way more effective and safer than spraying in that doormat. And then what you'll do is you just put that back at the end. Inside of door frames, avoid hitting the door handles and the doorbells. Not necessary. Things like that. Here you go. I feel like that's pretty good application around the exterior. I feel like there's a good barrier all the way around, at least 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet up, 2 feet out. Again, if it's a different product, you'll use a different application rate.